Finding $20,000 abandoned in the freezing snow would tempt anyone to take the money and run. But the ID tucked inside the cash belonged to Chicago's most terrifying syndicate boss, choosing survival over wealth. One destitute girl made the shocking decision to return the fortune, an unthinkable act that sent shockwaves through the entire criminal underworld. The wind coming off Lake Michigan on the night of November 14th felt less like weather and more like a physical assault. Daisy Hutchins pulled her threadbare wool coat tighter around her slight frame, her breath blooming in white clouds under the flickering glow of a broken streetlight. At 22, Daisy wasn't supposed to be sleeping on subway grates or dodging the brutal street gangs that patrolled the Lower Wacker Drive encampments. But the foster system had spat her out at 18 with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes, and the city had been chewing her up ever since. She was huddled in a dark alcove just off Rush Street, trying to stay out of sight of the affluent diners spilling out of the Velvet Room, a high-end Italian steakhouse. She wasn't begging tonight. It was too cold for the wealthy to stop and fish for change. She just wanted to absorb the residual heat venting from the restaurant's kitchen exhaust. Then, the squeal of tires shattered the icy silence. A sleek, bulletproof Mercedes G-Wagon skidded to a halt at the curb. Before the valet could even step forward, the heavy reinforced doors flew open. A man stepped out. Even in the dim light, Daisy could tell he was dangerous. He wore a tailored charcoal overcoat, his dark hair slicked back, his jaw sharp and set with grim tension. This was Dominic Calabre. Anyone who survived on the streets of Chicago knew the name Calabre. He was the 34-year-old head of the Calabre Syndicate, a sprawling empire built on racketeering, real estate fronts, and port smuggling. He was notoriously ruthless, a man who allegedly once dismantled a rival operation with nothing but a whisper to his underboss. Suddenly, the deafening roar of a modified motorcycle engine ripped through the street. A biker clad in black tore around the corner, raising a submachine gun. "Get down!" a massive bodyguard shouted, shoving Dominic toward the restaurant's heavy oak doors. Gunfire erupted, shattering the pristine glass of the valet stand. Daisy screamed, pressing her body flat against the freezing brick of her alcove, covering her head as stone chips and glass rained down. The chaos lasted only seconds. The biker sped off into the night, leaving behind car alarms and screaming pedestrians. Dominic's men swarmed him, rushing him inside the safety of the restaurant, weapons drawn, scanning the rooftops. In the chaotic aftermath, the street was deserted for a brief, breathless moment before the siren started wailing in the distance. Daisy cautiously pushed herself up from the concrete. Her knees were bruised, her hands trembling, as she moved to slip away into the shadows. Something caught her eye. Lying in the slush, half buried near the curb where the G-Wagon had parked, was a thick piece of black leather. Daisy crept forward, her worn boots crunching on the broken glass. She bent down and scooped it up. It was a wallet, heavy, made of genuine, textured alligator skin. She ducked back into her alcove, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, and opened it. She stopped breathing. Inside were neat, tightly bound stacks of $100 bills. It had to be at least $20,000 in cash. There was a matte black American Express Centurion card. But it wasn't the money that made the blood drain from Daisy's face. It was the Illinois driver's license. Dominic Calabre. Her thumb brushed against a hidden, zippered seam in the silk lining of the wallet. It was slightly unzipped, revealing a tiny, encrypted micro SD card and an ornate silver key. Daisy stared at the fortune in her hands. This money was a one-way ticket out of hell. It meant a warm apartment, hot meals, a new phone, a chance to start over in a city where no one knew her. She could disappear tonight, but a cold, creeping dread wrapped around her spine. You don't steal from the Calabre family and live to spend the money. They had eyes everywhere, the cops, the sanitation workers, the corner store clerks. If they reviewed the security cameras from the Velvet Room and saw a girl in a red beanie pick up the boss's wallet, she would be hunted down like an animal. Beyond the fear, though, was something else, a stubborn, battered piece of her own morality. She had lost everything in her life, but she hadn't lost her integrity. I have to give it back, she thought. Tonight. She knew where he lived. Everyone knew the fortress hidden behind high iron gates in the elite suburb of Oak Brook. It was a grueling 12-mile journey. She couldn't take the train, she had no fare, and she wouldn't risk being mugged by the Kingsmen, a brutal local gang led by a ruthless thug named Deacon who had been harassing her for weeks. So, Daisy walked. She walked through the biting snow, her feet going numb, her lungs burning with the freezing air. It took her nearly 5 hours. By the time she reached the towering wrought-iron gates of the Calabre estate at 4200 Oakville Lane, it was past 3 a.m. The snow was falling heavily now, coating the world in a deceptive, quiet white. She hesitated at the gate, staring up at the security cameras tracking her every movement. Taking a deep breath, she reached out with a trembling, frost-bitten hand and pressed the intercom button. "State your business," a gruff, mechanical voice barked. I have something that belongs to Mr. Calabre," Daisy stammered, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely form the words. "He dropped it tonight, on Rush Street." Silence. Then, the heavy gates groaned open with a slow, menacing crawl. Before Daisy could take more than 3 steps up the long, winding driveway, 2 massive men in tactical gear emerged from the shadows of the gatehouse. One of them, a scarred enforcer named Leo, grabbed her roughly by the arm. "Search her," Leo grunted. "Wait, please, I just want to give this back," Daisy cried out, fumbling in her coat pocket. She pulled out the black alligator wallet. The second guard, Dante, froze, staring at the leather. He snatched it from her hands, his eyes widening. He keyed his radio. "Boss, you're gonna want to come down to the foyer. We got it. Some street rat just walked it up to the front gate." Leo didn't let go of her arm. Instead, he dragged her up the driveway, through the massive mahogany front doors, and shoved her onto the pristine, heated marble floor of the Calabre mansion. Daisy collapsed onto the polished stone, her wet clothes instantly pooling dirty, melted snow onto the immaculate floor. The sheer opulence of the room was overwhelming, vaulted ceilings painted with frescoes, twin curving staircases, and the heavy scent of expensive cedar and lemon polish. She felt completely, horribly out of place, a dirty smudge on a perfect canvas. Footsteps echoed from the top of the grand staircase. Slow, deliberate. Daisy looked up. Dominic Calabre was descending the stairs. He had shed his overcoat, wearing only a crisp, black dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the faint edge of a dark tattoo on his chest. Up close, he was terrifyingly striking. His eyes were the color of slate, cold and utterly unreadable, locking onto her with the intensity of a predator, studying cornered prey. Beside him walked Vincent Castellano, his loyal and vicious underboss, who was frantically swiping through a tablet. "Is the drive there?" "Dante," Dominic asked, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that commanded the entire room. He didn't even look at the wallet. He was staring directly at Daisy. Dante unzipped the hidden compartment and carefully pulled out the tiny micro SD card. "It's here, boss. Looks completely untouched." Vincent let out a long, ragged exhale. Thank God. If Miles Moretti had gotten his hands on those offshore routing numbers, the entire Western supply line would have been compromised by dawn. Dominic slowly walked down the remaining steps and stood over Daisy. She scrambled backward, her back hitting the heavy oak of the front door. She pulled her knees to her chest, shivering violently, waiting for the punishment. Street rules dictated that knowing too much was a death sentence. She knew about the drive now. Dominic crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with her. He smelled of rich espresso, gun oil, and expensive cologne. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "See Daisy," she stuttered, refusing to break eye contact despite her terror. "Daisy Hutchins, Daisy Hutchins," he repeated, testing the syllables. "There is $22,000 in that wallet. Daisy, a blank black card, and a drive worth millions to the right buyer. You look like you haven't eaten a hot meal in a week. Why didn't you run?" "Because it's not mine," she whispered, "and because I'm not a thief. And I know who you are. I'm not stupid enough to steal from a Calabra." A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of Dominic's mouth. Honesty and self-preservation. A rare combination. He stood up and looked at Vincent. "Give her 10 grand from the vault and have Leo drive her wherever she wants to go." Vincent nodded, turning to head down the hall. "Wait," Daisy blurted out, her voice cracking. The sudden outburst made both Dante and Leo drop their hands to their holstered weapons. Dominic raised a single finger, silencing his men. He looked down at her, an eyebrow raised in dangerous curiosity. "You're refusing $10,000. Daisy forced herself to stand up. Her legs were shaking so badly she had to lean against the wall, but she lifted her chin. "If I take that cash back to the streets, I'll be dead in 3 days. The Kingsmen Deacon's crew, they track everything. They'll see the money. They'll kill me for it. Or worse, they'll force me to work for them. Money won't save me out there. Mr. Calabre." "Then what do you want?" Dominic asked, his patience thinning. "A job," Daisy said firmly. "Let me work for it. I can clean, I can cook, I can do laundry, scrub floors, whatever you need. Just let me stay here. Give me a safe place to sleep, and I'll work off the debt of whatever you think my life is worth." The foyer went dead silent. Vincent, who had paused in the hallway, let out a harsh laugh. "Kid, this isn't a charity. It's a syndicate headquarters. We don't hire stray cats off the street." But Dominic wasn't laughing. He was staring at Daisy, dissecting her. He saw the desperation in her eyes, but he also saw an ironclad resilience. She had walked 12 miles through a blizzard into a Mafia compound and was now negotiating her terms with the head of the family. He needed people with that kind of unbreakable loyalty. Furthermore, she had saved his empire tonight. If Miles Moretti, the head of the rival Moretti crime family, had found that drive, the war would have decimated Chicago. "Vincent," Dominic said, never taking his eyes off Daisy. "Yeah, Dom. Tell Maria to prepare the guest room in the East Wing, the one near the secondary kitchen." Vincent blinked, stunned. "Boss, are you serious? You're bringing an unknown civilian into the house. She isn't an unknown anymore. She's the girl who brought back the keys to the kingdom," Dominic said smoothly, He stepped closer to Daisy, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. "You want a job? Daisy Hutchins. You have one. You'll work in the kitchens under Maria. You'll be paid a fair wage, and you will have a roof over your head. As long as you are under my roof, you are under my protection. Deacon and his kingsmen won't lay a finger on you." Tears, hot and sudden, spilled down Daisy's frozen cheeks. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Dominic reached out, and for a second, Daisy flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, his large, warm hand gently grasped her frozen shoulder. "Go get warm. We'll talk about your duties tomorrow." As Maria, a stern but motherly housekeeper, led a bewildered and exhausted Daisy away. Dominic watched her go. "You're taking a massive risk." "Dom," Vincent warned, stepping up beside his boss. Miles Moretti orchestrated that hit tonight. He wanted that wallet. His men are probably reviewing the street footage right now. Dominic's expression hardened into a mask of pure, lethal ice. "I know." "If they see her picking it up," Vincent trailed off, "they'll think she's an operative. They'll think she copied the drive." Dominic finished. He looked at the spot on the marble where Daisy had just been standing. "Miles is going to come hunting for her. Vincent, put extra men on the perimeter and run a full background check on Deacon and his kingsmen. If anyone so much as looks at that girl sideways, I want them erased." Daisy thought she had found sanctuary, but as she washed the grime from her skin in a marble bathroom that night, she had no idea that returning the wallet hadn't ended the danger. It had merely placed her dead center in a Mafia war that was about to burn the city to the ground. For the first 3 weeks, the Calabria estate in Oak Brook felt less like a Mafia compound and more like a strange, gilded sanctuary. Daisy Hutchins traded her threadbare coat for a crisp white blouse and black slacks, working under the watchful, surprisingly maternal eye of Maria, the head housekeeper. Daisy scrubbed marble countertops until they gleamed, polished antique silver, and learned to bake focaccia from scratch. For the first time in years, she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder. She went to sleep in a warm bed, her stomach full, her door locked from the inside, but the reality of who she worked for was never truly hidden. She saw the armed guards patrolling the perimeter with assault rifles. She heard the low, tense voices of Vincent Castellano and the other lieutenants behind the heavy mahogany doors of the study. And then there was Dominic. They rarely spoke during the day, but the nights were different. Dominic suffered from insomnia, a side effect of carrying a criminal empire on his shoulders. Often. At 2 or 3 in the morning, Daisy would find him sitting alone in the dimly lit secondary kitchen, a glass of amber scotch in his hand, staring blankly at documents. One Tuesday night, a brutal Chicago thunderstorm rattling the reinforced windows. Daisy padded into the kitchen for a glass of water and found him there. He looked exhausted, the sharp lines of his face softened by the shadows. "I can make some coffee, Mr. Calabria," she offered softly, hesitant to intrude. He looked up, his slate-grey eyes locking onto hers. "Dominic, when it's just us, call me Dominic. And no, coffee will only keep me awake longer. Sit with me, Daisy." She cautiously sat across from him at the sprawling granite island. He pushed a small plate of biscotti toward her. "You're adapting well," Dominic observed, his voice a low rumble over the thunder. "Maria says you work harder than 3 of my hired staff combined. I owe you my life. Dominic, working hard is the least I can do." "You don't owe me anything," he replied, leaning forward, You gave me back the keys to my kingdom, but you need to understand something. The man who tried to take that wallet, Miles Moretti, he doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive. He's bleeding money because of the moves I made with that drive you returned. He is desperate." Daisy swallowed hard. "Does he know about me?" "He knows a girl in a red beanie picked up the wallet. He doesn't know who she is. I've buried your identity, wiped the street cameras my men could reach. You are safe here." He reached across the island, his rough fingertips briefly brushing her hand. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up her arm. "I protect what is mine." The possessiveness in his tone made her breath hitch. But Dominic's promise of safety was about to be violently tested. 50 miles away, in the grimy underbelly of the South Side, Miles Moretti's top enforcer, Lorenzo, was dragging a bloody, beaten man across the floor of an abandoned meatpacking plant. It was Deacon, the leader of the Kingsmen gang. "I'll ask you one last time. Street trash," Lorenzo hissed, pressing the barrel of a customized Glock to Deacon's kneecap. "My spotters say a blonde girl in a red knit cap practically lived on the corner of Rush and State. Your territory. Who is she?" Deacon spat blood onto the concrete, his bravado entirely broken. "Daisy. Her name is Daisy Hutchins. She's a nobody, a stray, but she's gone. Word on the street is the Calabre crew scooped her up. Some heavy hitters in a G-Wagon came and cleared out her stash box in the alley last week." Lorenzo smiled, a cold, reptilian curving of his lips. He pulled the trigger, ignoring Deacon's agonizing screams, and pulled out his phone. "Boss," Lorenzo said as Miles picked up. "The phantom girl who stole our drive. She's not a Calabre operative. She's a homeless civilian. Dominic took her in. She's his new pet. A civilian." Miles's voice crackled through the speaker, dripping with dark amusement. "Dominic Calabre has a soft spot. Find her. Lorenzo. Bring her to me. When Dominic comes to get her, we end the Calabre bloodline forever." 3 days later, Daisy accompanied Dante and Maria to an upscale grocer in the West Loop to pick up specialty meats for a syndicate dinner. It was supposed to be a low-risk, routine errand. Dante parked their armored SUV in the underground garage. As Dante popped the trunk to load the bags, a black van abruptly swerved around the corner, its tires squealing, and slammed into the side of the SUV. The impact threw Daisy to the pavement, her groceries scattering across the oil-stained concrete. Before Dante could draw his weapon, the van's door slid open. 4 men wearing tactical masks poured out, submachine guns raised. "Grab the girl," one of them shouted. Dante dove over the hood of the SUV, returning fire. "Daisy, run!" he roared, taking a bullet to his left shoulder that spun him to the ground. Panic seized Daisy, but the survival instincts forged on the streets kicked in. She scrambled under the massive chassis of the armored SUV just as a pair of heavy combat boots slammed down where she had been lying. "Where is she? Flush her out!" the leader yelled, firing a suppressed burst into the tires. Maria was screaming in the passenger seat. Dante was bleeding out on the concrete, trying to raise his gun with his good arm. Daisy squeezed her eyes shut, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. She was going to die here, pinned under a car in a dark garage. Then, the roar of a V8 engine shattered the chaos. A sleek black Dodge Charger tore down the ramp of the parking garage. Not bothering to brake, it slammed directly into the side of the black van, crushing 2 of Moretti's men between the vehicles with a sickening crunch. The driver's door kicked open. Dominic Calabre stepped out into the gun smoke. He didn't wear a suit today. He wore a dark tactical vest over a long-sleeve Henley, carrying a heavily modified combat shotgun. He didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He moved with a terrifying, calculated lethality. He fired twice, the deafening blasts taking out the man closest to the SUV. The last remaining Moretti goon raised his weapon, but a precise shot from Vincent, who had stepped out of the passenger side, dropped him instantly. Silence fell over the garage, broken only by the hiss of a punctured radiator. Dominic dropped the shotgun, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the carnage. "Daisy!" he bellowed, his voice raw with a panic she had never heard from the syndicate boss. "Daisy!" She crawled out from under the SUV, covered in grease and trembling violently. Before she could even stand, Dominic crossed the distance between them. He dropped to his knees, pulling her into a fierce, desperate embrace, crushing her against his armored chest. He buried his face in her hair, his massive hands trembling as they gripped her back. "I've got you," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "I've got you. You're safe." Looking over Dominic's shoulder, Daisy saw Dante struggling to sit up, holding his bleeding arm and looking at his boss with wide, shocked eyes. The message was clear to everyone in the room. Daisy Hutchins was no longer just a maid who had returned a wallet. She was the absolute center of Dominic Calabre's world. The ride back to Oak Brook was a blur of wailing sirens and the metallic scent of blood. The moment the armored SUV breached the wrought iron gates, the Calabre estate locked down into a militarized fortress. Steel blast shutters slammed over the windows. The perimeter swelled with heavily armed men carrying assault rifles. Inside the cavernous master study, Daisy sat shivering on a tufted leather sofa, a thick wool blanket pulled tightly around her shoulders. Dante was being stabilized by an underground trauma surgeon down the hall, but the echoing crack of gunfire still rang in her ears. Dominic stood by the roaring fireplace, staring into the flames. He hadn't bothered to take off his tactical vest. The air in the room was thick with unspent violence. "I need to go," Daisy whispered, her voice fracturing the heavy silence. Dominic turned, his slate-grey eyes locking onto hers. "What did you just say?" "I am a walking target," she said, standing up and letting the blanket fall to the floor. "Miles Moretti used me to bait you out. He nearly killed Dante today. If I stay here, your men will keep bleeding. Give me a little cash. Let me disappear." "Stop!" Dominic closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He didn't yell, but the absolute command in his low, gravelly voice made her freeze in her tracks. He reached out, his large, rough hands gently framing her face. "You aren't running anymore. Daisy, you survived the streets because you had to. Now, you have me." "Why are you doing this?" she pleaded, tears spilling over his thumbs. "I'm nobody. You're the only real thing in a world built entirely on lies," he murmured fiercely. "You walked through a blizzard to give back a fortune. You saved my empire. I didn't save you that night. You saved me, and I will burn Chicago to the ground before I let Miles Moretti touch you." He didn't give her time to argue. He leaned down and kissed her a punishing, desperate kiss that tasted of rain and gunpowder. Daisy gasped, her hands instinctively gripping his vest as the sheer gravity of the moment anchored her. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I end Miles tonight." Vincent set up a parley. "You stay here." "No," Daisy said, finding a sudden, unbreakable core of steel within herself. "If I'm not there, Miles will know it's a trap. Let me stand with you." Midnight at the Navy Pier, shipping yards, was a desolate, freezing nightmare. Icy rain lashed against the rusted steel containers as Dominic's black convoy idled at the edge of Pier 14. Miles Moretti stood waiting beneath the harsh glare of a single halogen spotlight, flanked by 24 heavily armed enforcers. Dominic stepped out of the G-Wagon, pulling Daisy out behind him. He kept his broad body angled to shield hers. Vincent Castellano and a dozen Calabria soldiers fanned out, their weapons lowered but ready. "Dominic Calabria," Miles called out, his voice a mocking sneer over the crashing waves. "You brought the stray dog. Hand her over to my men. Return my offshore routing codes, and I might just let you walk away with your life." Dominic's laughter was a dark, hollow sound that chilled the air. "You think this is a negotiation, Miles? You think I drained your accounts to line my own pockets?" Miles narrowed his eyes. "What did you do?" "I didn't take your money," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a lethal calm. "I wired every cent of your black market cash into a monitored Federal Reserve account. I gave the FBI the paper trail connecting it directly to your legitimate shell companies. They raided your downtown offices 20 minutes ago. You aren't just broke, Miles. You're a federal target." Miles's face drained of color just as his burner phone began to vibrate violently. He pulled it out, answering with a trembling hand. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He dropped the phone onto the wet concrete. "Kill them!" Miles screamed, scrambling backward in sheer panic. "Take them all down." Dominic shoved Daisy down behind the reinforced tire of the G-Wagon. But the Calabria men didn't even raise their rifles. They didn't need to. Dominic had positioned private military snipers on the towering loading cranes 3 hours before the meeting. The night erupted, not in a battle, but a synchronized execution. Suppressed rounds rained from the sky, disarming and dropping Miles's crew in seconds. When the brief, terrifying storm of gunfire ceased, Miles was on his knees, clutching a shattered collarbone, surrounded by his surrendering men. Dominic walked over to the ruined boss, his weapon aimed squarely at Miles's chest. "Your empire is gone. I'm taking your territory. If you ever show your face in Chicago again, I will drown you in this lake myself." He turned his back on Miles, the ultimate insult in their world, and walked back to Daisy. The violent tempest around them seemed to vanish as he offered her his hand. "It's over," Dominic said softly, pulling her against his chest. "We're going home." 6 months later, the homeless encampments beneath Lower Wacker Drive received a massive, anonymous influx of hot food, high-grade winter gear, and housing vouchers. The underworld whispered about Dominic Calabria's sudden shift in tactics, but those inside the Oak Brook estate knew the truth. They saw it in the way the ruthless syndicate boss looked at his new wife. Daisy had walked in with a lost wallet and out with the keys to the kingdom, transforming from a desperate street survivor into the untouchable, fiercely loved queen of the Calabria Empire. Did Daisy's brave choice leave you speechless? Sometimes, the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards, even in the dangerous world of the Mafia. If you loved this thrilling story of survival, loyalty, and unexpected romance, hit that like button, share it with your fellow drama lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, real-life inspired audio stories. Drop a comment below on what you would have done